In this analysis video, we're going to take a look at the evolution of Jack Nicklaus's golf swing. So I had a student ask a question of, obviously swings change a little bit as you get older. Are golfers pretty much trying to do the same thing and just the bodies won't cooperate, or are they trying to do something different because of a changing body? So he submitted this picture, and basically you can see that the impact position looks very different. Well, is he trying to make a different impact position, or is it just the same thing on a different body? I don't know for sure what Jack Nicklaus or any of the other golfers that I'm going to analyze as this evolution kind of series works on. I don't know exactly what they're thinking, but I have a few kind of theories as far as what stays the same and what changes. So what we'll take a look at are what stays the same, which is typically going to be triggers and sequencing, and then what changes, which is typically going to be range of motion, the steep and shallow blend, and bracing. Okay, so here we have two different iron swings, and if we look over on the right, we can see, let's take a look at triggers first. So you can see his little head cock off to the side, and as we go into the takeaway, you'll see that 30 years later or so, he's got that little head movement to start the program and some similar patterning. So we can see that he's kind of trying to do the same thing. Now, we'll see that as he gets towards the top of the swing, we're going to notice some pretty big differences. One, we can look at range of motion. So as we look over here on the right, we can see that he got his hands up a whole lot higher. His lower body rotated a little bit more, maybe not a ton more, but we can see that there's a pretty big difference in the amount of turn of his upper body as well as the amount of side bend. So he's developed some stiffness kind of in the spine region, and as a result, the arms are not going to create nearly as much depth. So since he's trying to do the same movement, but he has a blend of these steeps and shallows, the way the arms move and the way the body moves. If you take away some of the body movements, it's going to change that relationship. So having that amount of rotation and side bend tends to create deeper arms, which helps create shallow. Now, he also is able to keep his head at about the same height. So what we'll see as we kind of start through transition, you'll see that his trigger for starting the downswing is definitely lower body, but we'll see that some of his kind of steep shallow blend is going to be a little different. You'll see that his head stays at about the same height, and as a result of his head staying about the same height, you can see that his arms do a nice little shallow movement. There's lots of stories of Jack Nicklaus working with his golf instructor and his instructor holding his hair to try to keep his head still. We can see that he did a pretty good job in this particular swing of keeping the head kind of at the same level. Now, older Jack, if he didn't have the hat on and if his coach had been holding his hair, you can see he would have struggled a little bit there in the backswing, and we would see that he would struggle during the release. So who knows if that stand-up move is just part of Jack's natural tendency, and so his coach helped him to work on his pivot control by holding his head, and as a result of working on the pivot control and holding his head, he forced himself to learn how to shallow out with the arms. We can see that if he has a slightly steeper arm movement and now his body is standing up, those two are going to balance each other out, but it's not going to give us quite the same flat spot, and it's going to not allow us to power the swing quite as intensely with the body. So we'll take a look from a different perspective, and we'll look at the bracing strategy that's going to be a result of both the path as well as the range of motion and the impact conditions that he creates as he's evolved his swing over time. So here's an interesting find. We have almost the same camera angle, but these swings are taken about 40 years apart. So over on the left we have 2014 at the Masters, and over here on the right he was about 30 in a competition against Lee Trevino. So if we take a look at the movements to the top of the swing, again, we see that same trigger and head movement. And we can see that it's kind of a similar patterning of what he's trying to do, but it's shortened because of the range of motion, especially not nearly as much back rotation, right? We can't see nearly as much flexibility here in his rib cage, and that limits his ability to create that arm height. Now, what we'll see over on the right is a very good sequencing, getting the lower body to start, and then he gets well open, so when he comes through, you can see that those arms kind of do a really good job of releasing but continuing to straighten. They don't really bend. He gets into some tremendous side bend and rotation positions. Now, as you get older, once you've passed about 65 or so, you tend to lose about a third of the amount of side bending movement. You can maintain some with flexibility and strength training, but you're going to lose a little bit just as the natural degeneration of your spine. So what we'll see is in 2014, he still sequences and still starts with his lower body, but we know that he didn't have as much room for his arms because he didn't have as much rotation, so he didn't create the shallow depth that comes from rotation to the right. So even though he sequences his lower body first and then his arms, because his arms are going from a steeper position, he uses more vertical body movement and not quite as much rotation. So he's not going to get nearly as open as he did over here on the right in his prime. And so as a result, you'll see as he comes through, less body and steeper arm movement is usually going to result in those arms bending sooner. So you'll see that as he goes through, that left arm starts bending pretty much right after impact. Where if we scrub through those frames back and forth over here, because he's doing more of that bracing movement with his lower body, his upper body's in a better position, he's able to really extend those arms, have a really solid release. So there's obviously been some changes over the 40-year period, but I'm going to show you what's interesting is if we look at just this 3-year period between two of his ceremonial first tee shots, we can see a little bit of change. So over here on the left, we have Jack Nicklaus in 2011, and over here on the right, we have Jack Nicklaus in 2014. So it's only 3 years apart. He's 71 on the left and 74 on the right. So the age difference isn't that great, but we can see that they're, in the span of a few years, we can see some changes starting to kind of take place. It's not a great frame rate, but if we scrub back and forth, we can kind of see the amount of body movement. Over on the right, we'll see a little bit less kind of core and hip movement. Where this will really show up will be in the follow-through strategy or the bracing strategy. So he does a little bit more lower body initiation of his transition, and so as he comes through, you can see that left arm staying mostly straight as it kind of works with the body rotation. Now, over here, just 3 years later, we can see that as he comes through, because he doesn't have nearly the amount of body rotation, we can almost assume that he was in a steeper position, and we can see that that lead arm just starts bending almost instantly through impact. So while his brain is trying to power the swing and kind of control the path in a similar way, because of the path relationship and how it's working with his body, he's absorbing the speed differently in these two frames or in these two swings. So one of the things that we'll see from some of the other examples is if you're able to maintain some of your flexibility and strength, it's going to be a lot easier for you to maintain a more similar swing and kind of have it deteriorate slower. But what'll happen is if you get stiffer and you're not able to create the rotational depth during the backswing, we will tend to get steeper with our arm movements, which then causes more of a body stand-up move and less of that body rotation move. if you want to understand your swing and you want to understand the different pieces of takeaway, setting the club, transition, the release, and what to look for in this bracing strategy that I'm talking about, check out the content videos at golfsmartacademy.com, or for more analysis, feel free to subscribe to our YouTube channel.